My stepdad wants to sell me. 5 words. That's all it took to stop 109 Hell's Angels dead in their tracks. A 5-year-old girl, barefoot, bleeding, shaking like a leaf in a hurricane, ran straight toward the most dangerous-looking men she'd ever seen and begged them to save her life. What happened next shook an entire state and proved that sometimes the people society fears most are the only ones willing to fight for the innocent. Before we begin, subscribe to this channel, follow this story to the very end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see just how far this story travels. The annual Hell's Angels charity ride had nothing to do with heroics. It was a tradition, plain and simple. 109 bikers rolling through Cedar Falls, Montana, raising money for the local children's hospital, blowing off steam, and reminding each other why brotherhood still mattered after all these years. Nobody expected anything to happen. Nobody expected a miracle. And nobody, not one single man among them, expected a little girl to change their lives forever. Hammer rode at the front of the formation because that's where he always rode. 6'4", 270 pounds, arms sleeved in faded tattoos that told stories most people didn't want to hear. His silver beard touched his chest. His knuckles were scarred from decades of fights he never started but always finished. At 58 years old, he had buried friends, survived prison, rebuilt his life, and earned every ounce of respect the club gave him. He wasn't a man who smiled often, but when he did, people remembered it. Behind him rode Diesel, a former Marine who still woke up at 0500 every morning and ran 5 miles before breakfast. His jaw carried a scar from a piece of shrapnel that should have killed him in Fallujah. It didn't. He said God had other plans. He just hadn't figured out what they were yet. Then came Chains, the youngest at 26, fearless to the point of stupidity, loyal to the point of death. Stone, who hadn't cracked a genuine smile since his daughter passed from leukemia 4 years ago. Razor, whose real name was Timothy, but who would break your nose if you called him that. And behind them, 104 more men who had been labeled by society as outlaws, criminals, and degenerates. Society was wrong, but society didn't know that yet. They had pulled into a gas station on Route 7 to fuel up and stretch their legs. Tank was arguing with Razor about whose bike needed new shocks. Diesel was buying coffee. Stone was leaning against a wall, doing absolutely nothing, which was his favorite activity. The afternoon sun was high, and the air smelled like gasoline and pine. Then a scream shattered everything. "Please, please help me!" Every head turned simultaneously. From behind the gas station, stumbling over gravel, bleeding from her bare feet, came a little girl. Blonde hair tangled with dirt and twigs. A pink dress torn at the shoulder. Blue eyes so wide with terror, they looked like they might swallow her entire face. She was 5 years old, maybe less, and she was running like death itself was chasing her. "Please, my stepdad wants to sell me. Please don't let him take me." 109 engines went silent. The world went silent. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved, nobody breathed, nobody processed what they had just heard. Hammer was the first to react. He was off his bike and on his knees in front of the girl before anyone else had unfrozen. He made himself as small as a man his size could possibly be, lowering his voice to something gentle, something soft, something that didn't match his face at all. Hey, sweetheart, you're okay. You're safe. What's your name?" The girl grabbed his arm with both hands and held on like she was drowning. Emma Collins." "Okay, Emma, I'm Hammer. Can you tell me what happened?" "He's coming," she gasped. "He's coming for me. He told them he had something valuable, something young. He was talking on the phone and he thought I was sleeping, but I heard him. He said he was bringing me to them today." Hammer's blood turned to ice. He looked up at Diesel. Their eyes met and an entire conversation happened without a single word. "Who, sweetheart?" Hammer asked, keeping his voice steady even though his hands wanted to shake. "Who's coming for you?" Derek, my stepdad, he put me in the truck this morning and said we were going for a drive. But he didn't look at me. He didn't talk to me. He just gripped the steering wheel and his knuckles were white. And I knew something was wrong because he never takes me anywhere. Where's your mama, Emma? Her lip trembled. Her eyes filled with tears that had been waiting for permission to fall. Mommy went to heaven last year, cancer. Diesel cursed under his breath. Chains turned away, jaw clenching so hard a vein pulsed in his temple. Stone straightened up from the wall, his perpetual emptiness replaced by something dark and dangerous. After Mommy died, Derek changed, Emma continued, the words tumbling out faster now, desperate like she knew this might be her only chance to tell someone. He used to be nice. He used to bring me candy from the store. But then he got angry. He yelled all the time. He threw things. He hit me sometimes. She pushed up the sleeve of her torn dress. Bruises, purple and yellow and green, overlapping, some fresh, some fading. The kind of bruises that told a story no child should ever have to live through. Hammer's vision narrowed. Every biker in that parking lot saw those bruises. Every single one of them felt something shift inside their chests, something primal, something violent, something that had been sleeping and was now very, very awake. Then the scary men started coming to the house, Emma whispered. Men with mean eyes. They yelled at Derek. They told him he owed them money, a lot of money. Derek screamed back when he was drunk, but when they left, he just sat at the table with his head in his hands and cried. When was this? Hammer asked. All the time, every week. They came and they yelled, and Derek got more scared and more mean. She swallowed hard. Then one night I heard him on the phone. He said he had something they would pay for. Something young, something perfect. She looked up at Hammer with eyes that understood far more than any 5-year-old should. He meant me. Hammer placed both hands on her shoulders. Emma, listen to me. Nobody is selling you. Nobody is taking you. Not today, not ever. You understand me? She nodded, but her eyes kept darting toward the road. He's going to find me. He stopped the truck in the woods and told me to stay inside while he made a call. But I saw him put his hand over the phone so I couldn't hear. And I knew. I just knew. So I ran. I didn't look back. I heard your motorcycles and I followed the sound. You did exactly right, sweetheart. You did exactly right. Hammer stood up, and when he turned to face his brothers, the gentleness was gone. His face was granite. His eyes were fire. His voice dropped to a frequency that every biker recognized as the one that came before violence. Brothers, we got a situation. We heard, Diesel said, already cracking his knuckles. This ain't a vote. This ain't a discussion. This little girl is under our protection right now. Anyone got a problem with that? Silence. 109 men staring back at him with the same fury burning behind their eyes. Good. Chains, you're on Emma. Don't let her out of your sight. Don't let anyone within 10 feet of her. Chains stepped forward and knelt beside Emma. Hey, little one. I'm Chains. You like motorcycles? Emma managed a tiny, trembling nod. Good, because you're about to ride with the coolest guys in Montana. Nobody's touching you. I promise on my life. Where does he live? Hammer asked Emma. Your stepdad. Where's the house? The yellow house on Cedar Road, with the broken fence. Hammer looked at Diesel. You know it? I know it. 10 minutes from here. Then we ride. Hammer turned to the full formation. Every bike, every brother. We're not asking permission. We're not waiting for backup. That girl's stepfather has a house full of evidence and a phone full of contacts, and we're going to make damn sure he doesn't have time to destroy any of it. And if he's there? Stone asked, his voice flat and cold. Then God help him, because we won't. They mounted up. Chains lifted Emma onto his bike, wrapping her in Razor's leather jacket, making sure her small hands had something to grip. She looked like a doll sitting on a throne of chrome and steel, tiny and fragile, and yet somehow braver than all of them combined. "You okay up there?" Chains asked. "Yeah." Her voice was small but steady. "Are we going to stop him?" "We're going to do a lot more than stop him, sweetheart." 109 engines roared to life. The sound was deafening, violent, beautiful, like thunder with a heartbeat, like a war cry from the lungs of an army that had found its cause. They rode in tight formation, hammer at the front, cutting through traffic, blowing through stop signs, eating up the miles between the gas station and Cedar Road like the road itself was bending to get out of their way. People on the sidewalk stopped and stared. Cars pulled over. A police cruiser saw the formation, started to follow, then thought better of it when the officer counted the bikes and did the math. Emma held onto chains and watched the world blur past. The wind dried her tears. The engine vibrated through her entire body. She was terrified and exhilarated and confused and hopeful all at the same time, feeling things she didn't have words for yet. She thought about her mother, about the bedtime stories and the pancakes on Sunday mornings, about the way her mom smelled like lavender and always knew when Emma was sad before Emma even said anything. She thought about how quickly everything had fallen apart after the funeral, how fast Derek had turned from the man who carried her on his shoulders into the man who slammed doors and threw bottles and looked at her with dead eyes. She thought about the bruises, about learning to lie, about practicing her fake smile in the mirror so her teacher wouldn't ask questions, about the time Derek had grabbed her arm so hard she heard something pop, and she had told Mrs. Rodriguez she fell off the swing set. Nobody had questioned it. Nobody had looked closer. Nobody had stopped. Until today. Today, 109 strangers had stopped. 109 men who the world called dangerous had looked at a scared little girl and decided she was worth fighting for, worth riding for, worth risking everything for. Emma pressed her face against Chain's back and closed her eyes. For the first time in a year, she felt something she had forgotten existed. Safe. The yellow house appeared ahead. Hammer raised his fist and every bike slowed simultaneously, spreading out like a wave, surrounding the property from every angle. They filled the driveway, the lawn, the sidewalk. Neighbors came out of their houses, mouths hanging open, phones already recording. Someone would call the police eventually. That was fine. The police could wait. A rusted pickup truck sat in the driveway, engine running, driver's door open. Derek had beaten them back. He was inside. Hammer killed his engine and dismounted. He turned to Chains. "Keep her here. Keep her safe." "Nobody's getting near this kid, Hammer. Nobody." Hammer nodded. Then he turned toward the house, Diesel and Razor flanking him, Stone and Tank right behind, and behind them a wall of leather and fury that stretched across the entire front of the property. The front door was unlocked. Hammer pushed it open with one hand. "Derek Mitchell," he shouted, his voice filling the house like an explosion. "You've got about 10 seconds to show yourself before we come find you. And trust me, you don't want us to come find you." Silence. Then footsteps. Frantic, stumbling, panicked footsteps moving toward the back of the house. He was running. Hammer looked at Diesel. Back door. Diesel was already moving. He hit the back door at the same moment Derek reached it, and the collision sent Derek sprawling backward onto the kitchen floor. He scrambled to his feet, eyes wild, face drained of color, looking like a cornered animal that had just realized the cage had no exit. "Who the hell are you?" Derek screamed. "Get out of my house!" Hammer stepped into the kitchen. The room smelled like stale beer and something worse. Empty bottles lined the counter. Fast food wrappers covered the table. And there, sitting in plain sight, was an open suitcase stuffed with cash. Hammer looked at the suitcase, then at Derek. "That's a lot of money for a man with no job." Derek's eyes darted to the suitcase and back. "That's none of your business. This is my house. You're trespassing. I'm calling the cops." "Go ahead. Call them. We'd love for them to see what's in your phone." The color drained from Derek's face even further. which shouldn't have been possible since he already looked like a ghost. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. Hammer took another step forward. Your stepdaughter just told us everything. The phone calls, the buyers, the plan to hand her over to men who trade in children. She heard every word, Derek. Every single word. She's lying. She's a kid. Kids make things up. She's been doing this since her mother died, making up stories for attention. Stone pushed past Hammer and grabbed Derek by the front of his shirt, lifting him off the ground with one arm. Stories don't leave bruises, you piece of garbage. We saw her arms. We saw what you did to her. Put me down. This is assault. I'll have you arrested. Stone didn't put him down. Instead, he turned to Hammer. What do you want to do with him? Hold him, Hammer said. Razor, find his phone. It took Razor less than 30 seconds. The phone was in Derek's back pocket, unlocked, the message thread still open from his last conversation. What Razor found on that phone made even these hardened men go quiet. Hammer, Razor said, his voice tight, you need to see this. The messages stretch back months. Conversations with a man identified only as V about pricing, logistics, delivery schedules. Photos Derek had taken of children at the park, at the grocery store, at the elementary school. Notes about which ones had single parents, which ones seemed neglected, which ones would be missed least. Emma wasn't the first child Derek had scouted. She was just the first one he had tried to deliver personally. Hammer read the messages in silence. When he finished, he looked at Derek with an expression that made every other biker in the room take a half step back. How many? Hammer asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't touch anyone, I swear. Emma was going to be the first. They said if I brought them what they wanted, they'd forgive my debt. How much debt? $50,000 to a man named Vincent Rosario. He runs the whole operation. He told me if I didn't pay, he'd kill me. I didn't have a choice. Hammer grabbed Derek by the throat and pinned him against the wall. You had a choice. You could have gone to the police. You could have run. You could have done anything except sell a 5-year-old child to monsters. You made your choice, Derek. Now you live with it. Please, Derek whimpered. Please don't hurt me. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm going to do something worse. Hammer leaned in close enough to whisper. I'm going to make sure you never see the outside of a prison cell again. And I'm going to make sure Emma never has to see your face for as long as she lives. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had finally called the police. Hammer released Derek and stepped back. Stone kept him pinned against the wall while Ace pulled zip ties from his saddlebag and bound Derek's wrists behind his back. Razor, Hammer said, make copies of everything on that phone before the cops get here. Every message, every photo, every contact, then hand the original to the police. Already on it, Hammer walked back outside. The sunlight hit his face, and for a moment he just stood there, breathing, trying to push down the rage that was still boiling inside him. Then he walked to where Emma sat on Chain's motorcycle, her eyes wide, her body trembling, the oversized leather jacket making her look even smaller than she was. Is he gone? She asked. He's gone, little one. The police are coming. He's never going to hurt you again. Promise? Hammer knelt down. He took her tiny hand in his massive one and looked her straight in the eyes. I promise, on my life, on every life standing behind me, he's done. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Not the panicked, terrified tears from before. These were different. These were relief, release. The kind of tears that come when you've been holding your breath for so long you forgot what breathing felt like. And then suddenly, finally, someone tells you it's okay to exhale. She threw her arms around Hammer's neck and sobbed into his shoulder. He held her carefully, gently, like she was made of something precious and breakable. His massive arms formed a shield around her small body. You're safe now, he murmured. I've got you. We've all got you. Behind him, 108 bikers stood in silence, watching, their faces hard but their eyes soft. Some of them were fathers. Some of them were grandfathers. All of them understood that this moment, this fragile, devastating, beautiful moment, was exactly why they existed. Not for the rides, not for the reputation, not for the leather or the chrome or the thunder of engines on open roads. For this, for her, for any child who needed someone to stop, to listen, to believe, to fight. The police cars pulled up. Doors opened. Officers stepped out. But Emma didn't let go of Hammer, and Hammer didn't let go of her. The door exploded inward, and Hammer stepped through like judgment itself had arrived. Derek Mitchell stood frozen in the hallway, phone pressed to his ear, mouth hanging open. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Derek's survival instincts kicked in, and he bolted toward the back of the house. He didn't make it 5 feet. Diesel was already there, having come through the kitchen door that Razor had kicked in simultaneously. Derek slammed into Diesel's chest like hitting a brick wall and bounced backward, stumbling, arms pinwheeling. Before he could regain his balance, 4 more bikers poured through the windows, through the garage door, through every opening the house had. "Going somewhere?" Diesel asked, grabbing Derek by the collar and shoving him against the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. Derek's phone clattered to the floor. A voice crackled from the speaker. "Derek? Derek, what's happening? Is the package ready?" Hammer picked up the phone. His eyes never left Derek's face as he spoke into it. "Derek can't come to the phone right now. He's busy reconsidering his life choices." The line went dead. "You have no idea what you've done," Derek whispered, his face going pale. "Those people, they don't play games. They'll come for her. They'll come for all of you." Hammer handed the phone to Razor. "Get everything off this. Contacts, messages, call history, everything." Then he turned back to Derek, stepping so close their faces were inches apart. "Now, you're going to tell me exactly who you were planning to hand that little girl to." "I can't. They'll kill me." "And what do you think we're going to do if you don't talk?" Derek's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. His eyes darted around the room, counting bikers, calculating odds, finding none in his favor. "You're not killers. You're just bikers. You ride motorcycles and act tough, but you're not going to actually hurt me." Hammer smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "You want to test that theory?" Outside, Emma sat on Chain's motorcycle, wrapped in Razor's jacket, watching the house with terrified eyes. She could hear shouting from inside, crashing, something that sounded like furniture breaking. Her small hands gripped the handlebars so tight her knuckles turned white. "Is he going to hurt them?" she asked Chains, her voice barely a whisper. Chains shook his head. "Sweetheart, I've seen Hammer take on 6 guys in a bar fight without breaking a sweat. Your stepdad isn't going to hurt anyone ever again." "But those men he was calling, the scary ones, what if they come?" Chains looked down at her, his rough face softening. "You see all these bikes, all these brothers? Anyone comes for you, they're going to have to go through every single one of us first. And that's not happening. Not today. Not ever." Emma's lip trembled. "Promise?" "On my life, little one. On my life." Inside the house, Derek was talking, not because he wanted to, but because Diesel had found the suitcase full of cash and started counting it out loud, bill by bill, while asking Derek where a man with no job got $40,000. Derek had tried to claim it was savings, inheritance, a loan from a friend. Each lie earned him another shake against the wall. "Last chance," Hammer said. "Who were you selling her to?" Derek's resistance crumbled like wet paper. "A guy named Vincent Rosario. He runs some kind of operation out of the city. I don't know the details, I swear. I just know he pays good money for kids who won't be missed." "And you thought Emma wouldn't be missed?" "Her mom's dead. She has no other family. I'm the only one who even knows she exists." Hammer's fist connected with Derek's stomach so fast nobody saw it coming. Derek doubled over, gasping, tears streaming down his face. "You're right. Hammer said quietly. You were the only one. But now she's got 109 people who know she exists, and every single one of them would die before they let anyone touch her. Razor looked up from Derek's phone. Hammer, you need to see this. The phone's message history painted a picture more horrifying than any of them had imagined. Derek hadn't just contacted Vincent about Emma. He'd been communicating with him for months. There were discussions about other children in the area. Photos Derek had taken of kids at the park, at the school, at the grocery store. Notes about which ones had single parents, which ones seemed neglected, which ones might not be noticed if they disappeared. He's been scouting for them, Razor said, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. He's been helping them pick targets. Hammer turned back to Derek. The look in his eyes had changed. This wasn't anger anymore. This was something colder, something more dangerous. How many? What? How many children have you helped them take? Derek shook his head frantically. None, I swear. Emma was going to be the first. I only started doing this because I owed them money. They said if I helped them find kids, they'd forgive my debt. And you believed them? I didn't have a choice. Stone stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. Everyone has a choice. You just made the wrong one. Outside, the sound of sirens began to wail in the distance. Someone in the neighborhood had called the cops. But nobody moved to leave. Instead, the bikers who had been standing guard outside started pulling out their phones, taking photos of the house, of the suitcase of cash, of the motorcycle formation surrounding the property. Evidence. Documentation. They weren't just saving Emma anymore. They were building a case. Cops are coming, someone shouted through the window. Good, Hammer replied. They can take out the trash. But Derek had one more card to play. You don't understand, he said, his voice rising with desperation. Vincent knows I was making the handoff today. When I don't show up, he's going to send people. Not to find me, to find her. He doesn't let product slip away. That's what he calls them. Product. Hammer grabbed Derek by the throat and lifted him off his feet. Where was the handoff supposed to happen? The old mill, off Highway 19. He's waiting there right now. Hammer dropped him. Derek crumpled to the floor, coughing and gasping. Hammer turned to his brothers, his mind already working through the implications. Vincent was waiting. Vincent didn't know the deal had fallen through. Vincent was expecting a 5-year-old girl to be delivered to him in the next hour. Diesel, Hammer said, stay here with half the guys. Make sure this piece of garbage gets handed over to the cops properly. Tell them everything we found on his phone. Diesel nodded. And you? I'm going to the old mill. Hammer, that's insane. We don't know how many guys he has. We don't know what we're walking into. Exactly, which is why I'm not going alone. Hammer looked around the room at the faces of his brothers. 50 of them had come inside. 59 more waited outside. Who's with me? Every single hand went up. Hammer allowed himself a small smile. Razor, Stone, Chains, and 20 more. The rest stay here and handle the cops. We finish this tonight. They moved fast. 23 bikers peeled away from the formation, engines roaring to life like a war cry. Emma watched them go, confusion and fear mixing on her face. Chains had handed her off to another biker named Preacher, a gentle giant with a white beard who ran a youth ministry in his spare time. Where are they going? Emma asked. To make sure no one ever comes for you, Preacher replied. To make sure this ends, tonight. Emma didn't fully understand. She was 5 years old, and the darkness of the world was still something she was only beginning to comprehend. But she understood enough to know that these men, these strangers who had become her protectors, were willing to ride into danger for her. A little girl they'd only met an hour ago. She closed her eyes and, for the first time in weeks, she prayed. Not the bedtime prayers her mother had taught her. Something simpler, something desperate. Please keep them safe. Please don't let the bad men win. Please. The old mill sat at the end of a dirt road that hadn't been maintained in years. Rusted equipment surrounded the main building like the bones of dead giants. Two black SUVs were parked near the entrance, engines running, headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. Hammer and his brothers killed their engines a quarter-mile out and walked the rest of the way on foot. They spread out, surrounding the building from all sides, moving with a coordination that came from years of riding together, fighting together, trusting each other with their lives. Through a cracked window, Hammer could see four men inside. One of them, a heavy-set man with slick-back hair and an expensive suit that looked ridiculous in the abandoned mill, was pacing back and forth, checking his watch every few seconds. Vincent Rosario, he had to be. Derek should have been here by now, Vincent said, his voice carrying through the thin walls. Call him again. One of his men pulled out a phone, dialed, waited. Straight to voicemail. Vincent's pacing stopped. His eyes narrowed. Something's wrong. Maybe traffic? Derek doesn't get stuck in traffic. Derek does what he's told when he's told, because Derek knows what happens to people who disappoint me. Vincent pulled out his own phone. Get the car ready. We're leaving. If Derek got cold feet, we need to find him before he does something stupid like talk to the cops. Hammer had heard enough. He stood up and walked straight through the front door. Vincent and his men spun around, hands reaching for weapons. But they stopped when they saw what followed Hammer through the door. 22 bikers, spreading out to block every exit, their faces hard as stone, their hands carrying chains and pipes and the kind of fury that made guns seem unnecessary. Vincent Rosario, Hammer said calmly, we need to talk. Vincent recovered quickly. He was a man who had dealt with dangerous people his entire life. He straightened his suit jacket and forced a smile. I don't know who you are, but I think you might have the wrong person. My name is Victor Ramos. I'm just here looking at the property, thinking of buying it. Is that so? Hammer took another step forward. Then why did Derek Mitchell tell me you were expecting a 5-year-old girl tonight? A girl you were planning to buy like she was livestock. Vincent's smile faltered, just for a second, but a second was enough. I think your friend Derek may have been confused. Or lying. People like Derek lie all the time. It's what addicts do. He's not my friend, and he wasn't lying. He showed us the messages, the photos, the negotiations. He told us everything, Vincent, every dirty detail of your little operation. The temperature in the room dropped. Vincent's men shifted nervously, looking to their boss for guidance. But Vincent's mask of composure had cracked. Underneath it was something cold and reptilian. Even if what you're saying is true, Vincent said slowly, which it isn't, what exactly do you think you're going to do about it? You're a bunch of motorcycle enthusiasts playing vigilante. I have lawyers. I have connections. I have people in places you can't even imagine. You walk out of here right now, and maybe I forget this ever happened. Hammer didn't move. Here's what's going to happen instead. You're going to tell me where the other children are, the ones you've already taken. And then you're going to wait here while we call the police and hand you over like the garbage you are. Vincent laughed, a cold, hollow sound. You think I'm afraid of the police? I own the police. Half of them anyway, the ones who matter. Then it's a good thing we're not the police. Vincent's hand moved toward his jacket. One of his men pulled a gun. What happened next was so fast that anyone watching would have missed half of it. Chains through his chain, wrapping it around the gunman's wrist and yanking so hard the weapon flew across the room. Stone was on the second man before he could react, driving him to the ground with a tackle that would have made a linebacker proud. Razor went for the third, and the sound of fist meeting face echoed through the empty mill like a thunderclap. Vincent tried to run. He made it 3 steps before Hammer caught him by the back of his collar and slammed him face first into the nearest wall. The children, Hammer growled. Where are they? Go to hell. Hammer pulled him back and slammed him again, harder this time. Blood began to stream from Vincent's nose. I'm only going to ask one more time. Where are The children. Vincent's composure finally broke. A warehouse on the east side, 47th and Industrial. They're being held there until transport tomorrow. How many? 6. 6 kids. Hammer released him. Vincent crumpled to the floor, clutching his face, his expensive suit now stained with blood and dirt. His men were all on the ground too, groaning, defeated, surrounded by bikers who looked ready to continue what they'd started if anyone so much as twitched. Hammer pulled out his phone. He dialed 911 and put it on speaker. 911, what's your emergency? My name's not important. What's important is that those kids get rescued tonight. Send everyone you've got. He hung up before the dispatcher could ask any more questions. Stone looked at him. You think they'll listen? They'll listen. When they get here and find these guys tied up with enough evidence to bury them for life, they'll listen. Razor had already started zip-tying Vincent's men. Chains was going through their phones, finding more evidence, more horror, more proof of a network that stretched further than any of them had imagined. Hammer, Chains said quietly, some of these messages are from other cities. This isn't just local. This is big, really big. Then we make sure it all burns. Every name, every connection, every piece of this operation gets handed to the FBI, the state police, whoever will listen. Tonight was just the beginning. Vincent, his face a mess of blood and defeat, looked up at Hammer with hatred burning in his eyes. You have no idea what you've started. The people I work for, they don't forget. They don't forgive. You and your little motorcycle club just made enemies you can't even comprehend. Hammer crouched down until he was eye level with Vincent. Good, because here's what you need to understand. We don't forget either. We don't forgive either. And if anyone comes for that little girl or any other child, we will find them, we will stop them, and we will make sure they never hurt anyone again. That's not a threat. That's a promise from every single one of us. He stood up. Tie him up with the others. We wait for the cops. The sirens came 20 minutes later. 2 police cars at first, then more. Then unmarked federal vehicles that screamed FBI without needing any letters on the side. The bikers had cleared out by then, melting into the darkness like ghosts, leaving behind 4 bound men and a treasure trove of evidence that would take investigators months to fully process. But Hammer didn't go far. He stayed hidden in the trees, watching, making sure the arrests happened, making sure Vincent and his men didn't somehow slip away on a technicality or a bribed badge. Only when he saw the handcuffs click shut and the suspects loaded into vehicles did he finally allow himself to exhale. His phone buzzed, a text from Diesel. Cops took Derek, found all the evidence. Emma's safe, she's asking for you. Hammer typed back 2 words, on my way. The ride back felt longer than it should have. Exhaustion was settling into his bones, mixing with adrenaline and something else, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose, real purpose. Not just riding for the sake of riding, not just brotherhood for the sake of belonging, but something that mattered. Something that would leave the world a little better than he'd found it. When he pulled up to the yellow house, Emma was sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in a blanket, preacher beside her. She saw Hammer and her face lit up like a sunrise. She ran to him. Hammer caught her, lifting her into his arms, holding her against his chest. She was so small, so fragile, and yet she had survived something that would have broken most adults. She had run. She had screamed for help. She had trusted strangers when her own family had betrayed her. You came back, she whispered into his shoulder. Told you I would. Did you stop the bad men? Hammer thought about Vincent's face hitting the wall, about the warehouse full of children who would be rescued tonight because of what they'd done, about the network that was about to come crashing down. Yeah, little one, we stopped them. Emma pulled back and looked at him with those big blue eyes. Are you an angel? Hammer laughed, a real laugh, the first one in longer than he could remember. I don't think angels ride motorcycles, sweetheart. Mine do, Emma said simply. From now on, mine do. Lưu ý, viết 3.300 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện. Pha hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước, không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề. Tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột. Không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ. Phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ. Giọng văn giàu cảm xúc, chân thực và gần gũi. Không mô tả cảnh, tập trung vào hành động, cảm xúc và tâm lý nhân vật.
Viết phần 2 đạt điểm 10 trên 10 và bổ sung tiết tấu câu chuyện, nhanh, sửa lỗi A ơi, kể theo ngôi thứ 3, tăng độ kịch tính, không viết lan man, kết thúc phần, không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn, không nhảy sang mục document. Mỗi 2 đến 3 phút cần có mini climax và đạt 10 đến 15 mini climax mỗi phần. Cứ 10 đến 12 phút có một twist lớn sâu sắc, đan xen mini cliffhanger mạnh hơn. Tăng tính tự nhiên cho phản ứng của các nhân vật, thêm nhịp điệu kịch tính, thực tế và gần gũi. Mỗi 8 đến 10 phút cần có móc giữ chân khán giả. Lưu ý không mô tả cảnh và chỉ cần viết nội dung và viết đúng lệnh nhé. Show more, 9 giờ 59 phút. Orchestrated climactic narrative with dramatic tension, twists, and emotional depth. The user wants me to write part 3 of the story, continuing seamlessly from part 2. They want 3,300 words, seamless connection with previous parts, mixed dialogue to create a cohesive story, no reintroduction at the beginning of new parts, smooth transitions between parts, maintain themes, avoid abrupt breaks, no bullet points or subheadings. American storytelling style with emotional, authentic, and relatable tone. Focus on action, emotion, and character psychology, not scene description. Score 10 out of 10 quality. Fast-paced storytelling. Fix AI errors. Third-person narration. Increase dramatic tension without rambling. Don't introduce the next part at the end. Answer in message, not document. Every 2 to 3 minutes needs a mini climax, 10 to 15 mini climaxes per part. Every 10 to 12 minutes needs a major twist. Intersperse stronger mini cliffhangers. Increase natural reactions of characters. Add dramatic rhythm, realistic and relatable. Every 8 to 10 minutes needs an audience hook. No scene description, just content. Write according to instructions. This is part 3, climax section based on the outline. I need to continue from where part 2 ended. Emma calling Hammer an angel and him laughing. Let me write this continuing the story with high drama, emotional depth, and maintaining the pace. The story should focus on the aftermath, but also introduce new tensions and climaxes. I'll write about the immediate aftermath with police, Emma's situation being processed, the rescue of the other children from the warehouse, complications arising, Vincent's network fighting back, the bikers protecting Emma, building toward resolution. Let me make sure to include 10 to 15 mini climaxes, 1 to 2 major twists every 10 to 12 minutes, hooks every 8 to 10 minutes, strong mini cliffhangers, natural character reactions, fast pace, emotional depth, third-person narration, no scene descriptions, focus on action and emotion, show more, done. The moment didn't last, it couldn't, because 2 unmarked sedans came screaming down the street, tires squealing, and suddenly everything changed again. Federal agents poured out before the vehicles had fully stopped, weapons drawn, shouting commands that overlapped into chaos. Hammer pushed Emma behind him instinctively, his brothers forming a wall around them both. FBI! Everyone on the ground! Now! Hammer didn't move. We're the ones who called you. I said on the ground. Diesel stepped forward, hands raised but voice steady. We've got a 5-year-old girl here who just escaped a trafficking attempt.
Her stepfather's already in custody. We gave you the location of the warehouse. We're not your enemy. The lead agent, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper jaw, assessed the situation in seconds. She lowered her weapon slightly, but didn't holster it. Which one of you made the call about the mill? That would be me, Hammer said. You want to explain why 4 men are in the hospital right now? They resisted. Resisted what exactly? You're not law enforcement. Emma's small voice cut through the tension like a blade. They saved me. Every agent turned to look at her. She had stepped out from behind Hammer, her tiny frame barely visible among the massive bikers surrounding her. Her face was streaked with dried tears, her dress still torn, her feet still bare and bleeding. But her eyes were clear, defiant, brave. My stepdad was going to sell me to bad men, she said. I ran away and they found me. They stopped him. They stopped all of them. Please don't hurt them. Please. The lead agent's expression shifted. Something human cracked through the professional mask. She holstered her weapon and crouched down to Emma's level. What's your name, sweetheart? Emma. Emma Collins. Okay, Emma. My name is Agent Torres. I'm going to make sure you're safe now. Can you tell me what happened? Emma looked up at Hammer. He nodded. So she told her story again. Every horrible detail. The phone calls, the scary men, the way Derek had looked at her like she was merchandise, the running, the bikers, the rescue. By the time she finished, Agent Torres's jaw was clenched so tight it looked painful. She stood up and faced Hammer. The warehouse you mentioned. We sent a team. They found 6 children, ages 5 to 11, all scheduled for transport tomorrow morning. Hammer felt something in his chest release. 6 kids, 6 families who would get their children back, 6 nightmares that would end tonight instead of lasting a lifetime. Vincent Rosario talked? He's talking plenty, trying to cut a deal, giving up names, locations, the whole network. This is bigger than we thought, much bigger. Torres paused. What you did tonight was reckless, dangerous, completely outside the law, but more lives than my entire department has in the last year. She extended her hand. Thank you. Hammer shook it. Just doing what needed to be done. The girl needs to come with us. Child Protective Services is on the way. We need to document everything, get her medical attention, find her a safe placement. Emma's hands shot out and grabbed Hammer's vest. No, I want to stay with them. Torres's face softened. I know, honey, but these men can't take care of you. You need a real home, a family. They are my family. They saved me. Hammer knelt down, taking Emma's small hands in his massive ones. Hey, look at me. She did, tears welling up again. This isn't goodbye. You hear me? This is just the next step. These people are going to make sure you're safe, find you a good home with good people who will love you. But what about you? I'm not going anywhere. None of us are. We'll check on you. We'll make sure whoever takes care of you treats you right. And if they don't? He smiled grimly. Well, you know how to find us. Emma threw her arms around his neck and sobbed into his shoulder. Hammer held her, stroking her tangled hair, feeling something break and rebuild inside his chest simultaneously. He had done a lot of things in his life, some good, some bad, some he tried not to think about. But this moment, holding this little girl who had trusted him with her life, felt like redemption he hadn't known he needed. Promise? She whispered. On my life, little one, on my life. The CPS worker arrived 20 minutes later. A kind-faced woman named Margaret, who had clearly seen too much in her career, but hadn't let it harden her completely. She approached Emma gently, speaking softly, not rushing anything. Emma was reluctant at first, clinging to Hammer, but eventually she allowed Margaret to wrap her in a fresh blanket and guide her toward the waiting car. At the last moment, Chain stepped forward. He pulled something from his pocket, a small leather bracelet with the Hells Angels emblem stamped into it. Here, he said, fastening it around Emma's wrist. This is our symbol. You wear this, and you remember you've got 109 brothers looking out for you. Always. Emma stared at the bracelet like it was made of gold. Always? Always. She got into the car, the door closed, and as it pulled away, Emma pressed her face against the window, watching the bikers until they disappeared from view. Hammer watched until the car was nothing but taillights in the darkness. "You okay?" Diesel asked quietly. "No," Hammer admitted, "but she will be. That's what matters." The next 72 hours were chaos. The FBI raid on the warehouse made national news. Vincent Rosario's network turned out to span 6 states and 3 countries. His testimony brought down corrupt officials, compromised law enforcement officers, and business owners who had used their legitimate operations as fronts for something unspeakable. The children who were rescued went home to families who had given up hope. Parents who had spent months or years searching, praying, dying inside, suddenly got the call that changed everything. But not everyone was celebrating. On the 3rd night after Emma's rescue, Hammer received a phone call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer. When he did, the voice on the other end made his blood freeze. "You cost me a lot of money, Mr. Hammer. A lot of money and a lot of years of careful work." Vincent was useful, but he was always expendable. The network, however, is not. It rebuilds. It adapts. It remembers. Hammer's grip tightened on the phone. "Who is this?" "Someone who wants you to understand that what you did has consequences." "The girl you saved? Emma? She's in foster care now, isn't she? The Henderson residence on Maple Street. Nice family. Golden retriever. White picket fence." Every muscle in Hammer's body went rigid. "If you touch her..." "I'm not going to touch her. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But eventually, Mr. Hammer, everyone pays their debts. Everyone. Sleep well." The line went dead. Hammer was on his bike within seconds, phone pressed to his ear, calling every brother he could reach. "Emergency meeting. Now. Everyone. I don't care what time it is. I don't care what you're doing. Get to the clubhouse." By 2 a.m., 63 Hells Angels had assembled. The rest were either too far away or dealing with situations of their own, but they were patched in via speakerphone, listening, waiting. Hammer told them about the call, word for word, the threat, the knowledge, the implications. Stone was the first to speak. "They know where she is. That means they've been watching." "Which means they've been watching us too," Razor added. Diesel cracked his knuckles. "So what do? We can't guard a 5-year-old kid forever." "No," Hammer agreed, "but we can make sure the people threatening her understand exactly what happens if they try anything." "How?" Hammer had been thinking about this since the phone call ended. "We make a statement, a very public statement, something that tells every piece of garbage in that network that Emma Collins is untouchable, that coming for her means coming for all of us, and that coming for all of us is the last mistake they'll ever make." Chains leaned forward. "What kind of statement?" Hammer told them. By the time he finished, every man in the room was nodding. The next morning, 109 motorcycles rolled into Cedar Falls in a formation so precise it looked choreographed. They drove through the main street, past the police station, past the schools, past every business and home in town. The roar of their engines was deafening. People came out of their houses to stare. Children pointed. Dogs barked. The local news sent a van to follow them. They ended up at the Henderson residence. But they didn't stop. They circled the block. Again and again and again. A wall of chrome and leather that surrounded the house like a living, breathing fortress. Martha Henderson, Emma's foster mother, came out onto the porch with a cup of coffee in her hand and confusion on her face. Her husband Bill followed, equally bewildered. But Emma was right behind them, and the moment she saw the bikes, she started laughing. Really laughing. The kind of pure, unbridled joy that only children can produce. She ran down the steps before Martha could stop her, straight into the circle of bikes that had stopped in front of the house. Hammer caught her, swinging her up onto his shoulders as his brothers cheered. "What are you doing here?" Emma asked, beaming. "Making a promise," Hammer said, "to you, to everyone, that you're never going to be alone, that anyone who tries to hurt you will have to go through all of us first." He turned to Martha and Bill, who were watching with expressions caught somewhere between amazement and terror. "Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, we're not here to cause trouble. We're here because someone threatened this little girl, someone dangerous, and we want the world to know that as long as she's in your care, she's under our protection too." Martha's coffee cup trembled slightly in her hand. Protection from what? From the people her stepfather was working with. The ones who got arrested, they're just the tip of the iceberg. But you don't need to worry about that. You just need to take care of her, love her, give her the childhood she deserves. We'll handle the rest. Bill stepped forward, his jaw set. He was a former Marine. He recognized dedication when he saw it. "You're serious. Deadly serious, sir." Bill extended his hand. "Then welcome to the family." The handshake was firm, respectful. An understanding passed between them that needed no words. From that moment on, the Hendersons weren't just Emma's foster family. They were part of something bigger, something fierce and loyal and unbreakable. The news coverage that night was extensive. Local channels led with the story. 100 bikers surrounding a child's home. Threatening? No. Protecting. The community that had once viewed the Hells Angels with suspicion began to see them differently. These weren't outlaws. These were guardians. The phone calls from Vincent's remaining network stopped. The threats evaporated. Because whoever was left of that operation now understood something crucial. Emma Collins wasn't just a little girl anymore. She was the most protected child in America. But Hammer knew better than to think it was over. These things were never truly over. So he made arrangements, regular check-ins with the Hendersons, rotating patrols of the neighborhood that the residents didn't even notice. A network of eyes and ears throughout Cedar Falls that would report anything suspicious immediately. Weeks passed. Emma started school. She made friends. She learned to ride a bike that didn't have an engine. She planted flowers in the Hendersons' garden and named them after the bikers who had saved her. There was a sunflower called Hammer, a rose called Diesel, a daisy called Chains. She watered them every day, watching them grow, telling them about her life like they could hear her. Martha Henderson called the clubhouse one afternoon. "She's having nightmares," she said. "Not as bad as before, but they still come. She wakes up crying, asking for you." Hammer was at the house within an hour. He found Emma sitting on her bed, hugging a stuffed bear, looking smaller and more fragile than he remembered. He sat beside her, not speaking, just being present. "I dreamed he came back," Emma whispered. "Derek. He found me, and he took me away, and nobody could stop him." Hammer took her hand. "Do you remember what I told you? About the bracelet?" Emma touched the leather band on her wrist. "That you're always watching." "That's right. And Derek is never coming back. He's in prison. He's going to stay there for a very long time. The people he was working with, they're either in prison too, or they're hiding because they're scared of what we'll do if they show their faces. You're safe, Emma. Really, truly safe." "Promise?" "I've made you that promise before. I'll make it again every time you need to hear it. On my life, you're safe." Emma crawled into his lap and fell asleep there, her small fingers still wrapped around his. Hammer didn't move for 2 hours. When Martha came to check on them, she found them both peaceful, the big biker and the little girl, breathing in unison, connected by something stronger than blood. The adoption papers came through 6 months later. Emma Collins became Emma Rose Henderson. The ceremony was small, just family and close friends, but the party afterward was not. 109 bikers showed up with balloons, cake, and presents wrapped so badly it was obvious they had done it themselves. Emma laughed until her stomach hurt. At the end of the night, as the bikes roared to life for the ride home, Emma stood on the porch and waved. Her new family stood behind her. Her leather bracelet gleamed in the porch light. "I love you," she shouted over the engines. "All of you, forever." Hammer looked back. He couldn't hear her over the noise, but he saw her lips move. He knew what she said, and he knew that somewhere in his chest, in a place he had thought was closed off forever, something had opened up again. He touched 2 fingers to his heart, then extended them toward her. A salute, a promise, a bond that nothing and no one could break. Emma returned the gesture, her small hand pressed against her heart. Then the bikes pulled away, disappearing down the street, the sound of their engines fading into the night. Emma watched until she couldn't see them anymore, until the world was quiet again, until it was just her family, and the knowledge that she was loved. Martha put a hand on her shoulder. "Time for bed, sweetheart." Emma nodded, but she didn't move right away. She stood there a moment longer, looking at the stars, thinking about angels. Her mother had told her once that people who loved us become angels when they go to heaven, that they watch over us, protect us, guide us through the darkness. Emma had always imagined angels with wings and halos and soft white robes. Now she knew better. Some angels wore leather. Some angels had tattoos. Some angels rode motorcycles and spoke in gruff voices and looked like the kind of people you cross the street to avoid. But they were angels, all the same. Her angels. The ones who stopped when everyone else drove past. The ones who listened when no one else would. The ones who stood between a little girl and the monsters trying to swallow her whole. She touched her bracelet one more time. Then she went inside, closed the door, and finally, truly, felt like she was home.
Lưu ý, viết 3.000 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện, và hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước, không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch, sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ. Phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ. Giọng văn giàu cảm xúc, chân thực và gần gũi, không mô tả cảnh, tập trung vào hành động, cảm xúc và tâm lý nhân vật. Viết phần 2 đạt điểm 10 trên 10 và bổ sung tiết tấu câu chuyện, nhanh, sửa lỗi, AI, kể theo ngôi thứ 3, tăng độ kịch tính không viết lan man, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn, không nhảy sang mục document. Mỗi 2 đến 3 phút cần có mini climax và đạt 10 đến 15 mini climax mỗi phần. Cứ 10 đến 12 phút có một twist lớn sâu sắc, đan xen mini cliffhanger mạnh hơn. Tăng tính tự nhiên cho phản ứng của các nhân vật, thêm nhịp điệu kịch tính, thực tế và gần gũi. Mỗi 8 đến 10 phút cần có móc giữ chân khán giả. Lưu ý không mô tả cảnh và chỉ cần viết nội dung và viết đúng lệnh nhé. Show more, 10 giờ 4 phút. Orchestrated, emotionally driven narrative continuation with dramatic pacing and character psychology. The user wants me to write part 4 of the story, continuing seamlessly from part 3. They want 3,000 words, seamless connection with previous parts, mixed dialogue to create a cohesive story. No reintroduction at the beginning of the new part. Smooth transitions between parts. Maintain the theme. Avoid abrupt breaks. No bullet points or subheadings. American storytelling style with emotional, authentic, and relatable tone. Focus on action, emotion, and character psychology, not scene descriptions. Score 10 out of 10 quality. Fast story rhythm. Fix AI errors. Third-person narration. Increase dramatic tension without rambling. Don't introduce the next part at the end. Write in the message section, not document. Need mini climax every 2 to 3 minutes. 10 to 15 mini climaxes per part. Major twist every 10 to 12 minutes. Intersperse stronger mini cliffhangers.
Increase naturalness of character reactions. Add dramatic rhythm, realistic and relatable. Every 8 to 10 minutes need audience retention hooks. No scene descriptions, just content. Follow instructions exactly. This is part 4, so I need to continue from where part 3 ended. Emma feeling at home with the Hendersons, the adoption being finalized, and her relationship with the bikers being established. I should now move the story forward, perhaps time skip, show Emma growing, new challenges, perhaps the network threat returning, and building toward the resolution. Let me write this in a compelling, emotional American storytelling style with fast pacing and dramatic moments. Show more. Done. 3 years passed faster than anyone expected. Emma grew from a frightened 5-year-old into an 8-year-old with a fierce spirit and a smile that could light up entire rooms. She excelled in school, made friends easily, and talked about her biker angels so often that her classmates eventually stopped thinking it was strange. Some of them even asked to meet the men who had saved her. Emma always said, maybe someday, with a mysterious little grin that made her seem older than her years. The Hendersons loved her like she had always been theirs. Martha taught her to bake cookies and read chapter books. Bill taught her to throw a baseball and change a tire. They never tried to replace her mother or erase her past. They simply gave her a new chapter, one filled with warmth and safety and the ordinary magic of a childhood finally allowed to be normal. But normal never lasted forever. Not for Emma, not for anyone touched by the kind of darkness she had escaped. It started with a letter. Martha found it in the mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon, tucked between bills and advertisements. No return address, no stamp, just Emma's name written in neat, precise handwriting that somehow managed to look threatening. She opened it before thinking. The words inside made her drop the rest of the mail. "We haven't forgotten. Neither should you." Martha's hands shook as she pulled out her phone and dialed Hammer's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice rough from sleep. "Mrs. Henderson, everything okay?" "Someone left a letter. For Emma. No return address. It says they haven't forgotten." Silence. Then, "Don't touch anything else. I'm on my way." Hammer arrived within 30 minutes, Diesel in chains right behind him. They examined the letter, the envelope, the mailbox itself. No fingerprints, no identifying marks. Professional. Clean. The kind of message designed to terrify without leaving evidence. "Could be nothing," Diesel said, but his voice didn't believe it. "It's not nothing," Hammer replied. "Somebody knows where she lives. Somebody wanted us to know they know." Martha stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. "What do we do? Do we call the police?" "We call everyone," Hammer said. "Police, FBI, Agent Torres, and then we do what we should have done 3 years ago. We find out who's left of that network, and we end this. Permanently." The investigation that followed was unlike anything Cedar Falls had ever seen. Federal agents descended on the small town, interviewing neighbors, reviewing surveillance footage, tracing the letter through every possible channel. The Hells Angels conducted their own investigation, less official but no less thorough. They had contacts the FBI didn't, sources who would talk to bikers but never to badges. What they discovered changed everything. Vincent Rosario had died in prison 18 months ago, shanked in the yard by another inmate whose daughter had been one of the rescued children. Poetic justice, most people called it. But Vincent's death hadn't ended the network. It had simply passed to new leadership. Someone smarter, more careful, more patient. Someone who had been waiting 3 years to make a move. His name was Marcus Kane, and he was everything Vincent wasn't. Where Vincent had been loud and arrogant, Marcus was quiet and calculating. He never touched the merchandise himself, never made direct contact with anyone who could testify against him. He operated through layers of intermediaries, shell companies, and encrypted communications that even the FBI struggled to penetrate. But he had one weakness: pride. The same pride that made him send that letter to Emma. The need to prove he was still in control, still watching, still dangerous. Hammer used that pride against him. It took 6 weeks of careful planning, 6 weeks of tracking movements, identifying patterns, building a case that even the most expensive lawyers couldn't dismantle. The bikers worked alongside the FBI this time, an alliance that would have seemed impossible 3 years ago, but now felt natural, necessary, right. The raid happened on a Sunday morning. Marcus Kane was arrested at his penthouse apartment, still in his silk pajamas, still holding his morning coffee. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Financial records, communications, testimony from former associates who had been offered deals in exchange for cooperation. The network he had so carefully built came crashing down around him in a matter of hours. But Marcus Kane was not a man who accepted defeat gracefully. From his holding cell, he made one phone call, just one, to a number that connected to nothing traceable. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. The girl, make it loud. 3 hours later, a black SUV pulled up outside Cedar Falls Elementary School. Emma was in her 3rd grade classroom, working on a math worksheet, completely unaware that her life was about to change again. The school secretary noticed the SUV first. It had been sitting in the parking lot for 20 minutes without anyone getting out. She called the principal. The principal called the police. And somewhere in the chaos that followed, someone made a decision that saved Emma's life. Her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, received a text from an unknown number. Get Emma Henderson out of the building. Now. Back entrance. Don't ask questions. Mrs. Rodriguez didn't hesitate. She grabbed Emma's hand, told the class to continue working, and walked calmly but quickly toward the back of the school. Emma, confused but trusting, didn't resist. Where are we going? She asked. Someone needs to see you, Mrs. Rodriguez said. Someone important. They pushed through the back doors and found Chains waiting on his motorcycle, engine running, helmet ready. Emma's face transformed from confusion to joy in an instant. Chains, what are you doing here? No time to explain, little one. Hop on, we gotta go. Mrs. Rodriguez watched them disappear down the street, her heart pounding. She didn't know who had sent that text. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew with absolute certainty that she had just done the right thing. 2 minutes later, 2 men walked into Cedar Falls Elementary and asked to see Emma Henderson. They were told she wasn't available. They didn't believe it. What followed was a lockdown, a search, and eventually an arrest when the men couldn't produce any legitimate reason for being there. Emma never saw any of it. She was already miles away, racing down the highway with Chains, heading toward the one place where no one could touch her. The clubhouse had never been designed for children. It smelled like motor oil and leather, the walls covered with photos and memorabilia from decades of rides. But when Emma walked through the door, surrounded by 109 men who would die for her, it felt like the safest place in the world. Hammer was waiting. He knelt down and took her hands, his face serious but gentle. Emma, something happened, something bad, but you're safe now. You're always going to be safe. I know, she said, surprising him with her calmness. I always know, because you're watching. He hugged her, lifting her off the ground, holding her against his chest like she weighed nothing. Around them, the other bikers watched in silence. These men had seen war. They had seen death. They had seen the worst humanity had to offer. But watching their brother hold this little girl, this child they had all sworn to protect, something shifted in the room. Something powerful. Something unbreakable. Martha and Bill arrived an hour later, brought by a police escort and followed by Agent Torres. The reunion was tearful. Martha couldn't stop touching Emma's face, her hair, her shoulders, making sure she was real, making sure she was whole. Bill stood behind them, jaw clenched, eyes wet, looking like he wanted to find the men who had threatened his daughter and make them pay personally. It's over, Agent Torres said. Kane's network is finished. The men at the school are in custody. Everyone involved in planning this is either arrested or being hunted. There's no one left to come for her. You said that before, Hammer replied. 3 years ago. Torres nodded, accepting the criticism. I know, but this time is different. This time we didn't just cut off the head. We burned the whole snake. Every contact, every associate, every piece of infrastructure they built. It's gone. All of it. Hammer looked at Emma, then at the Hendersons, then at his brothers. And if someone new tries to rebuild, then we'll be watching, all of us, together. It wasn't a perfect answer, but perfection didn't exist in a world where men like Marcus Kane could operate in shadows for years without being caught. What existed was vigilance, dedication, love strong enough to build walls that even monsters couldn't breach. Emma tugged on Hammer's sleeve. Can I say something? He smiled. You can say anything, little one. She stepped into the center of the room, facing the bikers who had become her family in ways blood never could. Her voice was steady, clear, carrying a wisdom that seemed impossible for an 8-year-old. When my mom died, I thought I was alone. I thought nobody cared. I thought the bad things that happened were my fault because I wasn't good enough. She swallowed, her eyes glistening, but her voice never wavering. Then Derek tried to sell me, and I thought that proved it, that I was worthless, that I didn't matter. The room was absolutely silent. Not even breathing seemed to disturb the air. But you stopped, Emma continued. You saw a scared little girl on the side of the road, and you stopped. You listened. You believed me. You protected me when nobody else would. She touched the bracelet on her wrist, the leather worn soft from 3 years of never taking it off. You taught me that I matter, that my life is important, that there are people in this world who will fight for me even when they don't have to. She looked at Hammer, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I'm going to remember that forever. And when I grow up, I'm going to be like you. I'm going to help kids who feel alone. I'm going to show them they matter too. That's my promise. To you. To all of you. Hammer didn't trust himself to speak. He just nodded, his own eyes burning in a way they hadn't burned in decades. Diesel broke the silence with a rough laugh. Kid's gonna put us all out of business. The room erupted. Laughter, cheers, applause that shook the walls. Emma found herself lifted onto Stone's shoulders, paraded around the clubhouse like a conquering hero, while the men who had saved her life chanted her name. Emma, Emma, Emma! She laughed until she cried. She cried until she laughed again. And somewhere in the middle of it all, she understood something profound. Family wasn't about blood. Family wasn't about legal documents or matching last names. Family was about choice, about showing up when it mattered, about standing between the people you loved and anything that tried to hurt them. She had lost one family, a mother she still dreamed about, whose voice she sometimes struggled to remember. But she had gained another, a family of 109 brothers who rode motorcycles and looked scary and had hearts bigger than anyone would ever believe. She was Emma Rose Henderson, survivor, fighter, dreamer, and she was exactly where she belonged. The party lasted until midnight. The Hendersons eventually took Emma home, her eyes drooping with exhaustion, her face still split by a smile that seemed permanent. The bikers watched them go, standing in the parking lot, the rumble of idling engines filling the night air. Think it's really over? Chains asked. Hammer thought about Marcus Kane in his cell, about the network that had been dismantled, about the men who had tried to take Emma and were now facing decades in prison. He thought about every threat they had faced, every challenge they had overcome, every moment they had proven that good could triumph over evil if good was willing to fight for it. This chapter is over, he said finally, but the story goes on. There'll be other kids who need help, other families who need protection, other battles worth fighting. And we'll be there, Diesel said. It wasn't a question. We'll always be there, Hammer confirmed. That's who we are. That's what we do. The engines roared to life, one after another, 109 voices joining together in a chorus that could be heard for miles. They rode into the night, not toward any destination, just riding, just being together, just celebrating the fact that they had once again stood against darkness and won. In her bed across town, Emma heard the distant thunder of their engines. She smiled in her sleep, her hand instinctively reaching for her bracelet, her dreams filled with angels on motorcycles, in a world where love was stronger than fear. She was 8 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her, and no matter what challenges that life might bring, she knew one thing with absolute certainty: she would never be alone again. Lưu ý, viết 2.000 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện. Pha hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước, không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch, sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ. Phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giọng văn giàu cảm xúc, chân thực và gần gũi, không mô tả cảnh, tập trung vào hành động, cảm xúc và tâm lý nhân vật.
Viết phần 5 đạt điểm 10 trên 10 và bổ sung tiết tấu câu chuyện, nhanh, sửa lối ui, kể theo ngôi thứ 3, giữ độ kịch tính không viết lan man. Kết thúc dùng câu khẳng định mạnh để khép lại câu chuyện rõ ràng, trọn vẹn. Lưu ý, trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang mục document. Mỗi 2 đến 3 phút cần có mini climax và đạt 10 đến 15 mini climax mỗi phần. Cứ 10 đến 12 phút có một twist lớn sâu sắc, đan xen mini cliffhanger mạnh hơn. Tăng tính tự nhiên cho phản ứng của các nhân vật, thêm nhịp điệu kịch tính, thực tế và gần gũi. Mỗi 8 đến 10 phút cần có móc giữ chân khán giả. Lưu ý không mô tả cảnh và chỉ cần viết nội dung và viết đúng lệnh nhé. Show more, 10 giờ 12 phút. Orchestrated final story part với emotional climax và powerful closure. The user wants me to write part 5 of the story, which is the final part. They want 2,000 words, seamless connection with previous parts, mix of dialogue, no reintroduction of the story at the beginning, smooth transitions between parts, maintain theme, no abrupt breaks, no bullet points or subheadings. American storytelling style with emotional, authentic, and relatable voice. No scene descriptions, focus on action, emotion, and character psychology. Score 10 out of 10 quality. Fast story rhythm. Fix AI errors. Third-person narration. Maintain dramatic tension without rambling. End with a strong affirmative statement to close the story clearly and completely. Reply in message, not document. Mini climax every 2 to 3 minutes. 10 to 15 mini climaxes per part. Major twist every 10 to 12 minutes. Interweave stronger mini cliffhangers. Increase naturalness of character reactions. Add dramatic rhythm, realistic and relatable. Hook to keep audience engaged every 8 to 10 minutes. No scene descriptions, just content. Follow instructions exactly. This is the final part, part 5, breakthrough. So I need to wrap up the story with a powerful ending. The story should show Emma's growth, perhaps a time jump, and end with a strong, definitive statement. Let me write this continuation focusing on 1. Time jump to show Emma's growth. 2. A letter or message from Emma to the bikers. 3. The impact on the community. 4. A reunion or significant moment. 5. Strong emotional ending with a powerful closing statement. I'll make sure to include mini climaxes, twists, and hooks while maintaining the emotional, authentic American storytelling style. Show more. Done. 10 years changed everything and nothing at all. Emma Rose Henderson stood at the podium of Montana State University, her graduation cap slightly crooked, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The auditorium was packed with thousands of people, but she was looking for only one section, the one where leather jackets stood out
among suits and dresses. The one where gray beards had replaced some of the black ones she remembered. The one where her family sat. All 109 of them. When I was 5 years old, she began, her voice steady despite her nerves, I learned that monsters were real. They wore human faces. They lived in ordinary houses. They pretended to love you while planning to sell you to the highest bidder. The auditorium went silent. Parents shifted uncomfortably. Professors exchanged glances. But Emma kept going. I also learned that angels were real. They didn't have wings or halos. They had tattoos and motorcycles and names like Hammer and Diesel and Chains. They found me on the worst day of my life, and they chose to stop. They chose to listen. They chose to fight for a little girl they had never met. She looked directly at the biker section. Hammer sat in the front row, his beard completely white now, his shoulders still massive, but slightly stooped with age. Beside him, Diesel wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Chains pretended something was caught in his throat. Today I'm graduating with a degree in social work. Tomorrow I start my new job at the Cedar Falls Child Advocacy Center. And every single day for the rest of my life, I will carry the lesson those men taught me. Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. That one act of courage can change everything. That stopping for someone in need isn't just kindness, it's salvation. And that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when the world falls apart. She raised her diploma toward the biker section. This is for you, all of you, my angels, my family, my proof that good exists in this world. The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes, but Emma didn't hear most of it. She was already climbing down from the stage, pushing through the crowd, running toward the men who had made this moment possible. Hammer caught her first, lifting her off the ground like she was still 5 years old, still that terrified girl on the side of the road. I'm so proud of you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Your mama would be proud too. Emma buried her face in his chest. I couldn't have done this without you. Any of it. You did all the hard work, little one. We just gave you the chance. The other bikers crowded around, taking turns hugging her, roughing up her graduation cap, making jokes about how she'd finally learned something useful. But underneath the teasing, there was something deeper. Pride. Love. The kind of bond that didn't need constant words to survive. Martha and Bill Henderson pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down both their faces. Our daughter, Martha kept saying. Our beautiful, brave daughter. The celebration that followed was legendary. The entire Hells Angels chapter descended on Cedar Falls for a party that would be talked about for years. They rented out the town's biggest venue. They brought in a local band. They ordered enough food to feed an army and enough cake to give an elephant diabetes. Emma moved through the crowd, hugging everyone, thanking everyone, feeling like her heart might actually burst from the fullness of it. These men had watched her grow up. They had attended every birthday, every school play, every important moment. They had scared off every boy who looked at her wrong and cheered for every achievement she earned. They had been her constant, her proof that she mattered. But one moment stood out above all the others. Late in the evening, when the party had quieted and most people were sitting around sharing stories, Hammer pulled Emma aside. His face was serious in a way she hadn't seen in years. There's something I never told you, he said, something I've been carrying for a long time. Emma's stomach tightened. What is it? Hammer reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. This came 3 days after we found you. Before the FBI raid, before we knew how big the network really was. I never showed anyone, not the cops, not my brothers, just kept it. He handed it to her. Emma unfolded it with trembling hands. The handwriting was neat, precise, the same handwriting from the letter that had arrived at the Henderson house years ago. But this message was different. You have no idea what you've started. This girl was supposed to disappear. Instead, she became a symbol. Every time someone hears her story, they look a little closer at the children around them. They pay a little more attention. they become a little harder to fool. You didn't just save one child. You started a war you can't even comprehend. And for that, I will destroy everything you love. Emma looked up at Hammer, her hands shaking. Who sent this? Marcus Kane. Before we even knew who he was. Before anyone knew he existed. Hammer's jaw tightened. I kept it because I wanted to remember, to never get comfortable, to never think the fight was really over. But it is over. Kane's in prison. The network's gone. The network is gone, but the war? Hammer shook his head slowly. The war against people who hurt kids never ends. There's always another Kane out there, always another monster wearing a human face. That's why what you're doing matters so much. That's why your degree, your job, your whole damn life matters. Emma stared at the letter for a long moment. Then she did something that surprised them both. She smiled. He was right, you know. He just didn't understand what he was saying. She folded the letter carefully and handed it back. I did become a symbol, not of his failure, of something bigger, of what happens when good people refuse to look away, when strangers become family, when love beats fear. Hammer's eyes glistened. When did you get so wise, little one? I had good teachers. She hugged him one more time, feeling his massive arms wrap around her, feeling safe in a way that had once seemed impossible. Then she stepped back and squared her shoulders. Keep that letter, she said, and when the next monster shows up, when the next child needs saving, remember what it says. Remember that we started a war, and remember that we're winning. The party ended around midnight. Bikers started their engines one by one, the familiar thunder filling the night air. Emma stood on the sidewalk, watching them go, her graduation cap still crooked, her diploma clutched against her chest. Martha stood beside her, an arm around her shoulders. You okay, sweetheart? Emma nodded. Better than okay, I'm ready. Ready for what? For everything, for my new job, for helping kids like me, for being the person someone stops for when the world falls apart. She touched her bracelet, the leather so worn now it was almost white, for carrying this forward. The last bike pulled away, Hammer at the lead, just like always. He looked back once, raised 2 fingers from his heart toward her, and then disappeared into the darkness. Emma returned the gesture, her hand pressed against her chest. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment, the terror of that first day, the desperation, the feeling that no one in the world cared if she lived or died. She thought about Derek Mitchell, rotting in prison, his name forgotten by everyone except the court records. She thought about Vincent Rosario and Marcus Kane and all the other monsters who had tried to profit from her pain. They had all failed, every single one, because a group of bikers had stopped on a random highway and listened to a crying child, because they had believed her when no one else would, because they had fought for her, bled for her, risked everything for a stranger who had nothing to offer in return except trust. That was the real lesson, the one she would carry with her forever, the one she would teach to every child who crossed her path. You are not alone. You are not worthless. You are not invisible. Somewhere in this world there are people who will fight for you, people who will stand between you and the darkness, people who will love you fiercely and completely and without condition. You just have to hold on long enough to find them. Emma Rose Henderson walked back inside, ready to start the next chapter of her life. Behind her, the sound of motorcycles faded into the distance. Above her, the stars burned bright against the Montana sky. She was 18 years old. She was a survivor. She was proof that one moment of courage could echo through generations. And she was just getting started. 3 months later, she saved her first child, a 7-year-old boy named Marcus, who had been found hiding behind a gas station, too afraid to speak, too broken to trust. Emma knelt beside him, showed him her bracelet, and told him her story. Monsters are real, she said softly, but so are angels. And I promise you, From this moment forward, you are never going to be alone again. The boy looked at her with eyes that had seen too much darkness, and for the first time in months, he believed. Because Emma Rose Henderson wasn't just a survivor anymore, she was a beacon, a promise, a living testament to the power of strangers who refused to look away. The bikers had taught her that heroes didn't need capes or superpowers. They just needed the courage to stop when everyone else drove past. Now it was her turn to pass that lesson on. One child at a time, one life at a time, one act of courage at a time, until the darkness finally learned that it would never win. Not as long as there were people willing to fight. Not as long as love refused to surrender. Not as long as angels in leather jackets rode the highways of America, looking for lost children who needed saving. Emma Rose Henderson touched her bracelet one final time and smiled. The war wasn't over, but the right side was winning, and that made all the difference in the world.